Christmas Eve, my father stood up and tapped his glass. "After 40 years," he said, "I'm stepping back. The company goes to Marcus and Daniel." My brothers, everyone clapped. Then he looked at me, slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a check, $15,000. "For your years of help," he said. He smiled like he was doing me a favor. Help. I rebuilt their root system at 14, saved their biggest contract at 19, worked unpaid weekends for a decade, and I got an envelope like a tip at a restaurant. What would you do if your family erased you from everything you helped build? Before I continue, drop where you're watching from and hit subscribe. This one moves fast. They didn't know I'd been keeping records. 6 weeks later, Forbes called. My family saw my face on a cover they couldn't afford to buy. I grew up the youngest of 3 kids, the only daughter. My brothers played football. I stayed after school with my father, organizing invoices in his warehouse office. At 14, I noticed our delivery routes were inefficient. I redesigned them on graph paper, saved 11% on fuel costs that year. No one said thank you. By college, I was managing vendor contracts remotely while Marcus and Daniel posted vacation photos. They were finding themselves. I was finding ways to keep the company from bleeding money. But my grandmother saw me. She was the only one who did. One summer, she pulled me aside on her porch. "They'll never give you what you've earned," she said, "so build your own table." I didn't understand then. I do now. She passed 2 years later. Left me a letter and a key to a safety deposit box. I didn't open it right away. Grief does strange things, but I kept working. I kept saving everything. Emails, contracts. Every hour I worked that nobody paid me for, I told myself it was just good record keeping. Looking back, I think part of me always knew. That safety deposit box sat in a bank 40 minutes away. For years, I didn't touch it. I didn't know it then. But that box would change everything. 2 days after Christmas, Marcus called. His voice was light, casual. The way it always got when he wanted something. "Hey, I need you to sign over your informal equity interest in the company, just paperwork, a legal formality." I paused. Why wasn't I included in the transfer? He laughed, actually laughed. "You were never really part of this, sis. You helped out. That's different." I hung up. My hands were shaking. An hour later, my father called. His voice was colder. "Sign the papers. Don't make this difficult. I need time to review them. You got your check." That's more than generous. "I want to look at the documents first." Silence, then his voice hardened. "You have until New Year's, then we involve lawyers." He hung up. I sat there staring at my phone. 15 years. 15 years I had given that company. Every crisis, every contract negotiation, every late night fixing their mistakes. And Marcus called it helping out. My father gave me 5 days. He expected me to fold. To sign whatever they put in front of me, to disappear quietly. He had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I called a local attorney. He reviewed the situation and shook his head. "Without formal documentation of equity, you have no legal claim. Your name isn't on the LLC, you were never on payroll. But I have records of my work. That shows you contributed. It doesn't prove ownership." He paused. "And that check, if you cashed it, a court could see it as accepting a buyout." I hadn't cashed it, but I hadn't thrown it away either. I drove home in silence. That night, I sat on my apartment floor with a box of old contracts. Papers I'd saved for years. Evidence of every project I'd touched. Did any of it even matter? My phone buzzed. A photo from Marcus. Him and my father in the company conference room, toasting champagne. The caption read, "New era, thanks for understanding." I cried for an hour. Then I remembered the box. Grandma's safety deposit box. I still had the key. I thought I'd lost, but I hadn't opened everything yet. The next morning, I drove to the bank. My hands were steady as I signed in. The clerk led me to the vault. I held the key my grandmother left me. The box was small. Inside were 3 items, a handwritten letter, a notarized trust document, and stock certificates. I read the trust first. My grandmother had quietly purchased 12% of the family company back in 1987. She placed it in an irrevocable trust, with me as the sole beneficiary. Those shares were never transferred to my father's LLC. They were held separately, legally untouchable. I sat there staring at the document. Then I found the second envelope. Inside were brokerage statements. My grandmother had invested $800,000 in a venture fund back in 2012, in my name, money I didn't know existed, growing untouched for over a decade. She saw this coming, years before it happened. But that wasn't even the real secret. That $800,000 had been working, and I was about to find out exactly how much it had grown. I went silent, didn't sign anything, didn't respond to calls. By January 3rd, my father's attorney sent a cease and desist letter. It accused me of interfering with lawful business succession. Marcus texted the family group chat, called me greedy, delusional, unstable. My mother sent one message, "Just let it go, for the family." Then my younger cousin reached out privately. "They're telling everyone you're mentally unwell," she said. "That you're trying to extort them." Marcus said it at dinner last night. I stared at her message for a long time, 15 years of work, and now I was the crazy one, but I stayed quiet. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I was too busy researching. That $800,000 my grandmother invested, I tracked down the fund manager. The money had gone into an early-stage venture fund with a portfolio of tech startups. One of those startups was a logistics software company. I recognized the name immediately. It was a company I had mentioned to my grandmother years ago. I called it the future of shipping. They thought my silence meant surrender. They were very wrong. I met with a financial advisor to trace the full value of the account. He pulled up the brokerage statements, ran the numbers twice. Then he looked at me like I must be joking. "This position is worth $2.8 billion. I made him say it again. The logistics software company, FreightFlow, had gone public in 2021. My grandmother bought shares at 40 cents each. I now owned 9.4% of a company valued at $30 billion. The advisor showed me the cap table. My name was right there, had been for over a decade. But here's the part that made me laugh. My family's company, the one they just handed to my brothers, pays licensing fees to FreightFlow every single month. They use the software I partially own, and a Forbes journalist had already been researching FreightFlow's origin story. She found my name in the early investor filings. She wanted to interview me. My family wanted me to sign away a $40 million company. I was sitting on $2.8 billion. Before I made my next move, I dug into the family company's filings. I knew those documents. I'd helped organize them for years. What I found made everything clear. Marcus had taken out a $6.2 million line of credit against the company. The money funded a failed real estate development, condos in Florida that never got built. The company was bleeding, quietly, for almost 2 years. The succession wasn't a reward, it was a trap. My brothers weren't inheriting an empire. They were inheriting debt, and they needed me out before anyone could audit the books. That $15,000 check wasn't generosity. It was a bribe. They wanted me to disappear before the next quarterly review exposed everything. I closed my laptop and sat in silence. 15 years I'd wondered why they never valued me, why they treated me like I was invisible. Now I understood. They didn't exclude me because I was worthless. They excluded me because I would have seen the truth. Now I knew exactly what to do. I hired a corporate attorney, then a forensic accountant. I filed a formal claim on my 12% equity stake through the trust my grandmother created. The documents were clean. The chain of ownership was airtight. The Forbes journalist reached out again. I agreed to cooperate, but on one condition. She would hold the story until my legal position was secured. I didn't call my family. I didn't warn them. I didn't gloat. I just prepared. Weeks passed. Every detail was checked twice. On the morning of January 28th, I received an email from my attorney. Claim validated. Trust equity enforceable. Ready to proceed. I read it 3 times. That afternoon, I picked up my phone. I didn't want revenge. I wanted the truth on record. I sent my father one text message. Check your inbox, then check Forbes. I set my phone down and made a cup of tea. The next 48 hours would change everything my family thought they knew. Forbes published the next morning. The headline read, "The billionaire they forgot, How one woman's quiet inheritance outpaced a family empire. The article told my story, my grandmother's foresight, the $2.8 billion stake in freight flow. It also noted, without naming the family company directly, that a mid-sized logistics firm in the Midwest recently transferred ownership while omitting a legally binding trust beneficiary from succession documents. Within hours, my family's company was flooded with calls. Investors, auditors, their own bank. My phone rang. My father's name on the screen, no hello, just, "What have you done?" I kept my voice calm. I didn't do anything, I just stopped hiding what was already true. He hung up. That same week, my attorney filed the formal equity claim in court. The judge reviewed the trust documents, validated everything. I was awarded my 12% stake in the family company. I was also granted the legal right to audit their books. Marcus's hidden debt showed up in the filings. $6.2 million secured against company operating assets without board approval. Within 60 days, the company was forced into emergency restructuring. Their bank demanded answers. Their biggest client paused new orders pending review. My brothers asked for a meeting. I declined. The company board offered me a seat. I declined that too. I didn't need it. The company my father gave away was now worth less than the interest on what I inherited. I didn't plan that. I just stopped pretending I was invisible. 6 months later, Marcus was removed from leadership. The company my father spent 40 years building was sold to a regional competitor. At a steep discount, my father called one more time, asked for a loan. "Just to get back on our feet," he said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lecture him. I just said, "No, I hope you find your way, but not through me." He hung up without a word. I used a portion of my inheritance to launch a foundation in my grandmother's name. It funds scholarships and mentorships for young women in logistics and supply chain careers. Women like I was, overlooked, undervalued, building quietly in the background. I kept my freight flow stock but took no operational role. That wasn't my path. I moved across the country, started therapy, began writing. One day, a letter arrived from my mother. It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but she wrote, "I should have seen you." I kept the letter. I didn't respond. Some doors closed gently, and that's okay. Now I sit on a balcony overlooking the city, a cup of coffee in my hand, a journal beside me. Peace. Finally, they gave my brothers the company because they thought I didn't matter. Turns out I mattered more than any of them knew, but here's what I learned. Being seen isn't about proving people wrong. It's about finally seeing yourself and walking away from anyone who refuses to. If this story meant something to you, subscribe. I'll keep telling the ones that matter. And I have a question for you. Have you ever been overlooked by the people who should have known your worth? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. This story is a fictionalized dramatization and does not constitute legal or financial advice.